The next video we've got is another short form video from a YouTube channel, which I believe is called Daily Disciple, something like that.
If Jesus were on Earth today, would he identify as part of the LGBTQ community? No.
No is the end to that question. And I wanted to actually try and pause it briefly on what he had on screen. So if you were paying attention to what he had on screen, it was a headline from some kind of blog or something that said, would Jesus be part of the LGBTQ, is the way he read it. But the headline actually said LGBTQIA plus community. Now, the reason why I think that's an important difference is that I know that there's some people use these things different ways. The way I understand it is that the IA is for intersex, the A is for asexual, and the plus is to include anyone who identifies as queer, but also, and who wasn't already covered, but also for allies. Now, if you don't interpret that plus as including allies, that's fine. That's not the crux of the point. But would Jesus identify as part of these communities? Well, first of all, Jesus was known, one of his nicknames was friend of sinners, right? So it's tough to say that Jesus wouldn't have been an ally, at least of sorts, to people who identify in those communities. Now, he's going to talk a bit more. He does make the distinction between purely the attraction or non-attraction and the actual actions. Jesus didn't shun people who were tempted, right? Jesus was a friend to sinners. And so I think, absolutely, yes, he would have been ally. But Jesus, as far as we know, may never have actually been sexually tempted. That wasn't one of the things that Satan put forth for him in the desert. He didn't put forth a woman or a man of any sort to tempt Jesus and say, hey, why don't you enjoy your fleshly pleasures? It is entirely possible that Jesus of history, Jesus of the Bible, whatever version of Jesus you might think is worth talking about, may have been asexual, may not have had sexual urges. We don't know. But it's equally possible, if you want to say that Jesus was tempted just as we were and therefore knows and went through it without sinning, how can you say that Jesus wasn't tempted as everyone was if he didn't also have attraction to men, right? We don't know what lusts that Jesus, the man, may have struggled with. He may well have been bisexual. He may well have been gay. He may well have been in constant lust over just women. We have absolutely no idea. So to say that Jesus would not have identified as LGBTQIA+ is, I think, not really thinking through the question very well at all.
Oh, and here's why. Unfortunately, far too many people are caught up in the trap of letting their sexual proclivities define their identity. What's even more
So letting your sexual proclivities define you is a little bit weird. So for example, they would talk about, the prostitute Rahab, or they would talk the Bible absolutely did, or the tax collector, which implied a thief, or a lie or a demon possessed. The Bible constantly associated people with their sins. So I don't know what your idea here is, that this proclivity is defining us in a way that the Bible or Jesus wouldn't work on. But also, Christian heterosexual couples are constantly identifying with their sexuality. We have pastors constantly talking about their wives, and the fact that to be married is actually part of the qualifications of just being involved in church leadership in many churches. And like heteronormativity is worn on the sleeves of Christians all the time. Now, I know that you will say that, well, within the confines of marriage, it's not sin or whatever, but it is absolutely flaunting your attraction. This gentleman here, I'm assuming he's a gentleman based on his appearance, and from his other videos, I know that he identifies as a he. I'm assuming you're attracted to ladies, and that's part of your identity, and that's no different than someone from the LGBTQ+ community just trying to survive and be.
tragic is many of these tendencies are what God calls sexual immorality. The reason that Jesus wouldn't identify with this community is because he taught the opposite of what it stands for. The world tells us.
So again, not the way Jesus operated. Maybe you should read your New Testament Gospels again. Jesus associated with sinners, people whose behaviors that he spoke against. Jesus if you're saying, that we had a community of people who said, would Jesus associated himself as part of the thief community? Perhaps not, but he would have absolutely associated with that community and would have called himself a thief ally. Would he have associated as part of the liar community? No, but he would have considered himself a liar ally. So depending on where you put that what include with that plus? Jesus absolutely considered himself an ally to all sinners.
Us that we should love who we want to love and be who we want to be, that we were born this way. But Jesus said that we need to be born again, that we are dead in our trespasses and sins, and we have a tendency towards sin. But he wants to give us a new identity where we no longer find our identity in sin, but rather we find it in him. Throw off the shackles of this identity that the world is trying to get you to embrace, and instead step into the new identity that God is inviting you into today.
Okay, so correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong. He said in there that this identity that society is trying to get you to embrace. So I suspect that he means, and if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, but I suspect that he means that society is somehow actually trying to push people who are not attracted to members of the opposite sex or asexual or, any part of the, or gender identifying. Sorry if I meant to imply that trans was about attraction. That's not my understanding of it. We're wrapping this all together. A trans person can be attracted to anyone they want just as well as anyone else. It's this narrative, of course, that society is pushing these identities onto people. So I do not think that is correct, and that's a dangerous narrative. But of course, if it's really just trying to say that society is also saying, wow, if you actually do fall into one of these categories, and that's how you actually feel, and that's who you actually are, and that's the way you were born, that you should feel free to associate with them. Absolutely, you should, of course. Now, that's that Paulogia might disagree on gender politics and on gay rights, with the Christian, nothing new. More, I just wanted to explore for a minute that idea. I do think that this person hasn't thought through that Jesus may well have been part of the LGBTQ plus community. And if he wasn't, did he really experience temptation in the same way that all of us experience temptation, the way the Bible says he did? Let me know in your comments. Could Jesus have been part of the LGBTQ plus community and just never acted on it, or maybe secretly acted on it, depending on whether you're Dan Brown or not? Let me know in your comments your thoughts, and we'll go from there. Or your favorite emoji if you don't want to leave a comment.